Tax Justice Warriors started July 10, 2018, and it has been quite an eventful year in the tax field. I look to take a one-year retrospective of what has happened within the tax year, plus a look at what I have provided in tax news, education, and interviews. I hope to increase those efforts over the next year. But thank you for joining me in this retrospective of the first year of Tax Justice Warriors.
Welcome to Tax Justice Warriors, the podcast that celebrates the work of Low Income Taxpayer Clinics, focuses on tax controversy work, and looks at related issues in tax news. I am your host, William Schmidt, the director of the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic at Kansas Legal Services.
Tax Justice Warriors started on July 10, 2018, and its origin begins with my looking at the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic grant report, where there is tracking for radio interviews done regarding the various clinics. And I was thinking about how often I listen to podcasts when I am driving to and from work or doing different chores like washing the dishes or mowing the yard, that it is easy to put on a podcast and listen to what used to be termed talk radio, but now there is a whole variety of education, news, and entertainment available as podcasting. So I had started looking for tax news available as different podcasts, and what I found were podcasts that were sponsored by people who may be promoting their own accounting firm or research agency. And some of these items were for tax interests that were high dollar clients or other areas of tax law than what I normally work with. So I eventually came to the idea of, why not do a tax podcast that focuses on tax controversy work, dealing with audits and other issues with the IRS, dealing with tax litigation, but also the focus on individual income tax and low-income clients within the low-income taxpayer clinic world, providing news and education that, compared to some people who have decades within the tax industry, I would list them as the high experts, and I would say that I am intermediate compared to them. But I also thought I would give a bit of a primer for those who are new to the low-income taxpayer clinic field, passing on what education I can provide. Also, I thought that this would be a good way for me to have a creative outlet within my work in the low-income taxpayer clinic world. And I have some friends who do their own podcasts, so I learned what I could about both getting equipment and what it takes to host a podcasting site, to upload episodes to the internet that would be widely available to everyone. I spent some months trying to learn how to do that, kind of self-teaching myself. Some others of you in the LITC world got a little tired of me talking about podcasting, I would imagine, but eventually I gathered my knowledge and started in July of last year. My goal was to educate for items that would help the general public, but certainly focusing on tax controversies as well, looking at tax news of interest to a variety of people, and to provide interviews with others in the tax field who I think are doing similar work and could provide a different perspective on what is happening within the tax field. So during the last year, I have given some educational focuses on items like the Earned Income Tax Credit, the currently not collectible status, IRS forms and publications, liens and levies. And the last year has been an eventful year within the tax field. For one, there was the massive tax reform that is the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. There was the government shutdown, the longest in United States history, extending over 1 month and affecting several government departments, but our particular focus is the IRS and the United States Tax Court. very recently, there is the retirement announcement of National Taxpayer Advocate Nina Olson. The Supreme Court made their Wayfair decision, which affects state income tax, and the prominence of the new IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig, who brought along IRS Chief Counsel Michael Desmond. Quite a bit has happened in the last year, so I am glad that I've been able to capture those items as they were happening throughout the year. I interviewed some of my peers, Benjamin Tompkins, Omid Feruzzi, and Andrew Belter. I would recommend that you look at those episodes to hear what they are doing and some of their history. But I also brought a focus to the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic conference last December and the American Bar Association tax section meeting this last May. Both were in Washington, D.C. That I would encourage you to go to a tax conference. Not only are there very good educational programs, I certainly recommend the American Bar Association tax section meetings, but you get a chance to network and meet various peers within the tax field that often will either help you with your career, help you learn within the tax field, gain knowledge and insights into another area of tax. But also, I have found that tax practitioners are some of the friendliest and helpful people that you will find, especially, I would say, compared to other attorneys. I think tax attorneys are often some of the nicest and, like I was saying, friendliest and helpful people that you will find out there in the industry. Now, looking at the next year, I have said at the end of last year I wanted to make more headway with the Kansas Department of Revenue. I don't feel that I've been able to make much traction with them, but this year I have become involved with an initiative regarding collection due process. I've spoke on that some in past episodes, but there will certainly be more focus as the episodes go on throughout this year, that we are looking to put together work groups trying to bring change to collection due process, improvements, and fixes that would help a variety of people, both taxpayers, private practitioners, the tax court, the IRS, all with improved ways of helping everyone and bringing fairness into the process even more than what is set up at this point. At this time, we have different ideas for the October American Bar Association tax section meeting, the fall meeting in San Francisco, and then in December, the Low Income Taxpayer Representation Workshop in December at Washington, D.C., with part of that potentially in conjunction with the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic conference. There will certainly be more news as that develops. On the writing side, I have more articles that I need to draft for procedurally taxing, and I'm looking to write one for the American Bar Association tax section letter, The Tax Times, the American Bar Association publication Effectively Representing Your Client Before the IRS is in its 7th edition, but over this year we are revising for the 8th edition. Next year we'll be editing, and so before long the 8th edition will be published. I do hope to provide more interviews over the next year. There's some people I've talked to that have committed, but part of the tricky part is coordinating those interviews, setting those times, and just figuring out the logistics. So that is something I hope to improve on. But if you would definitely like to be interviewed, please contact me. And I welcome any and all feedback. I can be reached at my work email, schmidtw@klsinc.org. That's schmidtw@klsinc.org. I thank you for your listening during this time, and I certainly think that the audience that I reach is much better than when I've been doing outreach in public at public libraries and other events the year before. I've hit much better numbers. I'm reaching people throughout the country, and I've gotten good feedback from new or growing Low Income Taxpayer Clinic people within the field that they have gained insights and learned items from me by listening to the podcast. So I hope this is something good for you to listen to on your commute. I thank you for listening, and I promise more to come over the coming years.
Thank you for listening to Tax Justice Warriors. We have a Patreon page if you'd like to support this podcast. Providing monetary support for this podcast helps with expenses like equipment or travel to tax conferences. Supporting this podcast through Patreon comes with rewards, so check out our Patreon page. Please rate or review this podcast because positive reviews help get more people to know this podcast exists. The views expressed on this podcast are not official opinions of the IRS, the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic program, or the employers of the people who spoke on this program. Your tax situation is unique, so do not take the statements on this program as tax or legal advice. Consult with your own tax professional to provide you with specific advice on your situation. Tune in next time on Tax Justice Warriors for another interesting tax discussion.